Roger, both of us have offices in London, and there's a lot going on over there right now, and I know you spend a lot of time in the EU generally. What are you seeing at DLA in terms of the impact of Brexit, and what are you predicting will happen over the next year or so?
Actually, I was in Madrid last week for our global board meetings when the Brexit vote occurred, and for the firm as in general, and I think for the communities as a whole, it was obviously a huge surprise. And there was a great deal, even by those that ultimately were leavers, there was a great deal of sadness over it. I was thinking that in all of our careers, there's no one that actually has been in law firm practice that hasn't been at a time when either the UK was with the common market or with the European Union. So it's completely new for everybody. Conventional wisdom is that it will take quite a while for anything really to happen. There'll be a lot of ins and outs and a lot of conversation about it. There are huge media feeds from various countries about what various countries are going to do or not going to do. Our view is that the best that we can do is continue to advise our clients on a regulatory change and potential regulatory change. We're doing that. We have a very active web page that is being reviewed by clients all the time. We're giving advice, but it would be silly and not straightforward not to believe that there's going to be some impact on the UK and UK business. The question is, in my mind, as to what's the ultimate impact. How much is the ultimate impact? And what's likely to happen, I think, over a period of years is that there will be less business in the UK, and some of the capital movements will move to other continental European cities. And in the effect of that won't necessarily mean that there's less breadth and depth in the London capital markets. What it'll mean is that there's more breadth and depth maybe in Paris, maybe in Frankfurt, and so on. So from our point of view, it's kind of business as usual. We're trying to recognize the impact, but recognize also the relative calm. You can see that the impact on U.S. markets was short, and then there was recovery. And we're viewing it as a regulatory opportunity to give people advice, at least for the near term. Mm-hmm. You obviously have a big presence in London as well. What are you guys thinking?
So I think we're seeing the same thing you are. I happened to be in Paris when it happened, and so certainly the surprise, I think, was felt everywhere, although we, I think, like you, were really well prepared for it. We've had a Brexit team in place for 6 months that's cross-border, cross-regulatory, cross-functional, cross-industry. So we've spent a lot of time sort of preparing to be able to advise our clients. And I think what we're seeing the most in terms of the immediate impact is that period of uncertainty. And uncertainty is always unsettling for people. I think it's a great time for law firms to be able to help their clients work through that period of uncertainty. And I think, and it sounds like you agree, that when we come out the other side, you're still going to have a very strong, very robust practice, certainly in the legal field, and I think even in the economy in the UK, but it may look a lot different. And it's a little bit ironic because we live in a period where I think collaboration and combination has been more the order of the day. And so for everyone dealing with a situation that kind of goes in the opposite direction is a little bit unsettling. So we're all watching and seeing, and I think it will work out ultimately, but I think the uncertainty is the hardest part for people to deal with.
So let me just comment on that for a second. London is not going away. I think we all would agree that London is not going away. It's a valuation hit, for sure. There have been articles in many publications that we all read all the time that talk about well, if you were planning on a strategic transaction, would now be the time because of lack of correlation in currencies and valuation hits that people have taken. So generally speaking, I think we think that people will recover relatively quickly, will go on, see valuation opportunities. But there's no question in my mind that there's going to be a shift of where some of these transactions occur and what their levels are, their valuation levels are.
Yeah, and we would agree with that.
So another big development in the legal among law firms recently has been the very significant raise in associate salaries. We all have our own conclusions about it, which we'll discuss right now, but I wondered what your view of it was generally.
Yeah, I think this is a very tough issue because we've all been hearing for several years now clients expressing real frustration with what they perceive to be sort of the tone deafness to a certain degree and the excesses in law firms. And when you have something like this happen, I think it really creates a lot of energy around that issue. And that's why you've seen some very well-respected clients being very public in different publications about the fact that they don't expect to pay for this. And I think that's not a surprising reaction. To a certain degree, I think law firms have hurt themselves in a way because when they focus on industry competition, they're often out there touting associate increases or higher profits per partner or higher rates or things of that nature, which just really are not in our clients' interest and are very hard to defend. At the same time, we have many, many clients, as I know you do, who are in highly competitive industries, and they rely on us to have top quality lawyers. So they understand that when you're in a situation where a market shifts, you're going to have to shift that as well. But I think we are hearing from them that they expect law firms to recognize that that's an expense of doing business by the law firm and not something they expect to pass on to clients. And I think, at least from Morgan Lewis's perspective, our view is that we have been working for several years to work with clients on these issues, including by partnering with them on alternative fee arrangements, trying to focus on the value proposition, using technology to make things more efficient, doing a lot of our own training, and doing things generally to make sure that we're delivering very high quality at increasingly competitive costs. And I don't think we expect that our clients are simply going to pay for this by passing on some rate increase. We recognize that it is a cost of doing business, but unfortunately, I think an impact of this is to kind of set up a divide sometimes between clients and law firms where clients just think law firms aren't listening to them. And I think that's an unfortunate side effect of something like this. What are you guys doing with this? Obviously, a Verine where you're in so many different markets.
Yeah.
You're not just looking at this from the perspective of the US or the UK. How are you at DLA approaching these issues?
Well, because of the Verine structure, we have a little more flexibility, and also because it's a little bit different when people are qualified at different levels, unlike the way they're qualified in the U.S. through a law firm, through a law school process, and then taking the bar and so on and so forth. But I will say that the U.S. leads because the U.S. is the biggest legal spend, and law firms in the U.S. reflect the largest piece of law firm business probably in the world. I have a very similar take on this. For me, it's a number. The number is a question of what your talent management is and how you're going to compete in order to get the best talent. There's so much discounting both at the time of billing and at the time of engagement going on, and the demand for legal services is so bifurcated and segmented now that this by itself was just another form of expense that we have grown accustomed to absorbing. And as a result of that, it will have an impact on margins, clearly, and our ability to actually recover it is not something that we should assume is possible. And so that's how, analytically, that's how I go into it. Your point about us as a profession, kind of putting a glass jaw into the profession by virtue of some of these things with clients is something that I've been thinking about for a long period of time. It obviously happened to the medical profession. And for us, we should be doing everything that we possibly can in our relationships with clients in order to avoid that. On the other hand, we've got a business to run. There's stewardship around that business. There's talent management, as you've said rightly. Clients expect only the best and the brightest, and we're all in a pitched battle to get them. And if somehow we are not in a position to pay the highest levels, we're going to be perceived differently as a brand. And all of us are looking at our branding and what that means in the larger legal profession as a whole, as to how we compete, what we compete about, and so on and so forth. And also, our clients look at our brand and say, is this a brand that I want to be associated with? Is it troubling that a very small group of law firms, essentially in New York, could drive this kind of industry result? Yeah, that is a troubling fact. But I think we're all grown-ups, and that's the way business operates, and we're going to just move on, frankly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you, and I do think a lot of our clients, and we've talked to a lot of them about this, I talked to a lot of our clients before we made our decisions about what to do, and I do think they understand that this is a very competitive environment, and it's increasingly competitive in some ways. We're all in a war for talent. While we're talking about the talent side, you know, one of the things that comes up with our clients all the time, and I'm sure you hear it a lot too, is although more than half the people graduating from law school are women, and frankly have been since I graduated from law school way back then, we still see that only about 17% of the partners at law firms, major law firms in the country, are women. And so we have clients asking us all the time, what are we doing to improve the diversity in the profession, especially as they become more diverse? In fact, in many cases, sometimes some of our best women are going to our clients.
Right.
But what are you doing at DLA Piper to address this issue, and what do you see as the things that we should be doing as a profession?
At the same time as we were having the global board meetings in Madrid, we were having our induction of new partners, and there were global induction of new partners, and there were 85 partners in the room, of which I would say half, at least half, were women. Mm-hmm. And the question that evolved was how you deal with differing approaches to work style, how one deals with family issues, and how one deals with competition. Each of them were at various age levels in career stage and so on and so forth. They weren't necessarily all people who were newly minted, qualified people who had, you know, gone through an associate continuum. Some of them were laterals and so on and so forth. So there was a sense almost of what, as some were millennials, which is a whole other issue for us to discuss, and how one deals with a different approach to work and life and everything else, and how that impacts the law firm. What we're doing is trying the best that we can in a highly competitive environment, one, to retain them, two, to make sure that they're not at risk for any of the things that they ought not be at risk for, three, that they get exactly the same opportunities as everybody else gets in the process, but recognize, and I said this at the induction, I said, look, this is a very competitive industry at this moment. You may feel that you want a different kind of work life and work approach, but there's going to be someone else out there, whether a woman, a man, who is going to be working very hard because they have one goal in mind. And part of it is the level of what's your real commitment, not only to the firm, but to the practice of law at a very high level. And it's very hard for us to sort of drill down and crawl into people's heads and figure out really what their commitment is, particularly as law schools, particularly in the United States, have grown to be so expensive and people are so in debt and they've got this overhang that they're trying to deal with. We're completely committed to it. We've been a diverse firm for a long period of time. We have a big diversity program, as you well know. But part of it is what goes on in the head of the person who you're preaching to. Mm-hmm. I don't think they have a resistance from the firm. The question is, what are they integrating psychologically as the kind of things that they want to do with their legal career? So I would say that was sort of an Eisenhower answer, as opposed to the question you asked. It was the question I wanted to answer.
Good.
But it's something that's a very high priority for me as the chair, one of the global co-chairs of the firm and one of the co-chairs in the States, as to how we do better. I just feel like we're not doing well enough. And I'm struggling with it like you're struggling with it. I'm really, really struggling with it, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly difficult issue. I mean, it won't surprise you to know that it's something that I've thought a lot about, not just in my own career, but certainly since becoming elected chair. One of the things I hadn't anticipated is how much attention there would be on me as the chair of the largest firm headed by a woman. And so I get asked about that a lot. And I think that the point you made about opportunities is a really key one, because although there is a belief and a sort of vision that the biggest problem with women progressing is the search for work-life balance, what the studies all increasingly show is that women are leaving because they don't perceive that their opportunities in law firms are sufficient to justify the cost. It's more a cost-benefit analysis than a work-life balance. And I think I've spent a lot of time thinking about how we can change that perception. One of the things that's interesting to me is all the women, not just at my firm or other firms, who look and see, okay, a woman is a chair of a large global firm. That means those opportunities are there. What we try to do, some of the things we've been trying to do, is make sure that we're looking at the opportunities that people are getting, but also just being aware of the fact that there's not only one path. So as you said, there may be differences in timing, but there's also differences in style. Finally, the world is focusing more on implicit bias, and the reality is we all have it, and we can't help it. We tend to think about people who look like us, or who are like us, or who replicate our experience. So one thing I think is very important from our perspective, and we do a lot of training for clients on this, so it's good for us to have that in-house capacity, is making sure that we're aware of the fact that there may be differences in style and approach. I think another thing that people are focusing on very much is how the firm's traditional compensation models or passing down of the torch affects new entrants into the profession. At most firms, the majority of the women partners are in sort of the junior half of the partnership, not the senior half of the partnership. And so recognizing that we run businesses, what ends up happening is a focus on a woman's ability to really generate business, to be part of a collaborative team that is providing important client service. And on that score, a point that I often make is clients will say to me, what can we do? What can we as clients do to improve this? And my answer is always, if you have a woman who you think is great and who you like working with, call her. Like, pick up the phone and call her. Don't just, assume that someone else will find that person. And I think that has two impacts. First is it establishes the value of the woman in the client's eyes, but it also sends a signal to that woman that this is something where there is a future and there is a path. And to me, that's the most important thing, is making sure people know. I still think this is a great profession for women. It is the original flex time job for all of us. And it's very engaging and intriguing and stimulating, and you can vary it in different parts of your career. but making sure women see that and know that is our biggest challenge.
The only thing I would comment about is what you were saying about about clients and telling clients that they should promote their feelings about women. I think one of the things that we have definitely suffered from, as far as women that we thought had a real path to leadership and a real path to more senior status, is that the clients take them.
Absolutely.
The clients are not embarrassed about saying, why don't you come over here, and this is the kind of lifestyle that you'll have, and this is the kind of work that you'll do, and so on and so forth.
Right.
And that, after numbers of years of training, where you hope that somebody is going to have a path to a more senior status in the firm, is a debilitating part of running a law firm. And that goes back to all of these questions about talent management and how we retain, in an increasingly competitive world, the talent that it's so hard to obtain and we aspire to. I'm taken, I think, by a number of women at our firm who have made choices because they're so committed. And it's a question of making sure that and it goes with all kinds of diversity and inclusion. It's not just about women. Making sure that the mentors are there and they really want to be proteges. You can have an institutional framework that has all the bells and whistles on it, but if the people aren't prepared to spend the time, if senior people aren't prepared to spend the time and train people and show them that they have a path, it all falls of its own weight.
Well, I think that's completely true, and two of the things you said really resonated with me. First of all, with all of our diverse talent, and not just women, our biggest competition is from our clients. And so we will have tremendous diverse talent in the firm that ends up being, general counsels of other places.
Right.
And so I guess if you look at it from an industry, a profession perspective, if you say, how is the legal profession doing for women or lawyers of color or other diverse lawyers, I think that there's optimism on that. If you ask about how law firms are faring, in part, we're losing out to our client competitors, and so you can look at that a different way. I think generally, anytime a great lawyer goes to a great client, it's a win-win. But if the client then turns around and says, "Where are all your women?" that makes it a little bit difficult. So I do think that we all struggle with this. But I think when you talk about the great women at your firm, many of whom I know and think so highly of, who have made choices, to me, it's still getting the word to more junior women that those choices don't have to be either or. I have 4 children. I've had children my entire career. I have a great husband. I am on community boards. There's a lot of things you can do. It's just you may not be able to do all of them perfectly. And if you can accept that, you can balance things, but sometimes that balance is going to be a little bit off. I think in the long run, there's great opportunities for women, but we're not doing as well as you say. I think accurately, we need to do better than we're doing.
Yeah, particularly this issue with the clients is a huge issue. As they build in-house staffs that are frankly small law firms or in some cases large law firms, it becomes even more difficult because they have their own recruiting process. They have their own alumni process. They have their own process that very much mirrors a law firm. And they, frankly, are a quality place for women and people of color and so on and so forth to practice. And we have not proven institutionally as a law firm, and I'd say that's not only about DLA, but generally speaking law firms in general, we have not proven that we are as accommodating a place for people of color or women or people with different kind of sexual preferences and so on and so forth. We are not proving that well enough.
Yeah, it's going to be a struggle for us for a long time to come, I think.
It's going to be a struggle,
yeah,
for sure.